Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at another STEM picture books. This one focuses on a minority that's not female. This is a Jewish minority book. So this is the Polio Pioneer by Dr. Jonas Salk and the Polio Vaccine. So one thing to notice, and I looked this up, the author is Linda, and goodness gracious, I'm going to mispronounce this, Elovitz Marshall, and the illustrator is Lisa Anchin. What's interesting about both these, the author and the illustrator, is, and I find this very funny, slightly odd, they both went to all-girls colleges that were part of what's called the Seven Sisters, which were the female equivalent to schools like Harvard and Yale, which were all male for a while. So Marshall went to Bernard, which is still an all-girls school, and Lisa Anchin went to Smith College, which oddly enough one of my nieces is going to. Again, they're still, both of them are still in operation and still all-girls schools. So back to this book. So this book tells the story of a Jewish, the child of Jewish immigrants. So it starts off that it's the end of World War I. So, and people are all happy. Jonas Salk is 4 years old. Basically what he saw injured and wounded soldiers and soldiers who were unable to walk. And he wanted to learn. So his parents, he did a lot of reading. So he was not out playing. He knew the rules though. So they would call on him as a referee. So his parents came to America to find better lives. They fled they were Jewish. They fled Russia and Lithuania to escape religious persecution. So his mother didn't really have much of an education. When he was growing up, she primarily only spoke Yiddish. So, but she eventually went to school to learn to speak English, but when he was a child, she could only read and write in Yiddish. And then his father was he was a lace maker, but they were very, very poor. But they encouraged him to go to school. So, and he wanted to make things better. So he went to City College of New York, which the tuition was free, because again, he was very, very poor. And Jews were welcome. Again, as much as we like to pretend, particularly after the Holocaust, the U.S. was not Jew-friendly. We weren't. So it doesn't surprise me that they would not consider a Jewish boy of immigrants to be welcome in a lot of colleges. So he went to City College in New York, where he discovered chemistry. And he wanted to understand medicine. So he went to medical school to become a doctor and a researcher. Then he worked with his teacher and his friend, Dr. Thomas Francis, and they worked to create the first flu vaccines. So that's one of the things that they did. They worked to figure out how to create the flu vaccines, and they figured out if you could use chemicals to kill the live flu vaccine, and it still existed, but it could no longer infect people, it could help inoculate people and vaccinate them against the flu. So they looked at a whole bunch of flu vaccines and kind of figured out, can we do this? And they could. And they did. As is evidenced by the fact that we have a flu vaccine constantly. So basically their flu shot helped prevent people from getting the flu. Since then, flu shots have saved thousands of lives each year. Yes, the flu still kills people. Get your flu shot. This is being shot in September, so we're entering into flu season here. I have not gotten my flu shot yet. I think they're starting to come out. And I do. Ever since I got pregnant, I started getting my flu shot every year. So yes, we are very pro-vaccine. So moving on. So, but there was another disease that was going on. One that most people in my generation don't even think about, which proves how good their vaccines are. So we're looking at polio. So at the time, polio paralyzed and killed thousands of people every year, including many babies and small children. including possibly a future President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. President was in a wheelchair. So, people fearing that polio could spread through water, communities closed swimming pools and beaches. They kept their children from movie theaters, sleepovers, and crowds. They were afraid of how this was spread. If I remember correctly, polio it's spread through fecal matter, but it's often on the hands. Think about your children not thoroughly washing your hands or toilets flushing, stuff like that. It's that's how it spreads, and it's extremely contagious and very, very dangerous, very deadly. So everywhere, the book says, people were worried, but could polio be prevented? So he believed it could. So he worked with a bunch of people to develop a polio vaccine, and they experimented and tested ideas. And eventually they labored day and night and night and day. Wonderful illustrations here. I'm not sure how accurate it is to have black people in there, though they might be. The time period. So, and eventually they studied different polio vaccines. Now that was new to me. I didn't realize there was multiple polio vaccines or multiple polio strains, because pretty much polio's been mostly dead in the United States since before I was born. So it is still, I think, alive in places like Afghanistan, unlikely to change anytime soon, and it can still get into the U.S. Anti-vaxxers are irritating because they might be able to bring diseases we don't want to come back. I don't think we have the ability to fight polio right now. And again, so just like with the flu vaccines, they killed a polio virus with chemicals, so it is dead. It is a dead virus. It can't infect you with polio. And they tested it in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then he gave many of the shots to himself. So, old science. You want a guy who's going to trust things? He's shooting these vaccines into himself. So, he trusted himself enough to risk getting himself killed. So, and eventually, the vaccine appeared safe and seemed to strengthen body's defenses against polio. But would it actually prevent polio? A larger test with many participants was needed. So he participated in a gigantic test, probably one of the first, besides, flu. And basically, throughout America, they tested almost 2 million children, polio pioneers. And on April 12, 1955, Dr. Francis announced to the world, the vaccine works. Polio could be cured. Everybody was very, very happy. Within a few years, cases of polio plummeted. And again, you have all these people, they're lining up because they were that afraid of this disease. Because polio is nasty. It's nasty. So soon, throughout America and much of the world, polio was almost completely gone. It is not completely gone. It is almost completely gone. So, but Salk kept working and dreaming and decided on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He started the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. And there, researchers question and discover, seeking cures for things like cancer, HIV, AIDS, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and other diseases. By the way, no, we do not have a vaccine for any of the things I just named. MS is obviously, a lot of these things are still wandering around. And no, we don't have vaccines for diabetes. So, and that is the end of this story. Because he thought differently. That's kind of the theme. He was a kid who thought differently. And the last line is, ever met a kid like that? That could be you. So, and it does list sources in the back. And let's see, does it give me some information? Yeah. So there is an author's note. So basically the author she was born in the 1950s. They couldn't go swimming in pools, lakes, or ponds. They couldn't go to movie theaters because of polio. And every summer, this seemed very much a summer disease, the disease raged. So her mother, like many parents throughout the country, did their best to protect them. They kept him from crowds and public swimming places. And one summer, she had moved their family to a smaller city where she thought polio was less likely to strike. So she knew actually very little about polio growing up. And a boy in her neighborhood caught the disease, but he recovered, but not completely. He was never able to walk without a crutch, which was pretty common with polio. Is if you survived, you either were in an iron lung, or essentially you lost the use of your legs or just couldn't walk very well anymore and were paralyzed in sometimes arms, sometimes legs. So it became very, very difficult. So apparently he became the author's hero, and she named her child after him. So because he changed lives. He not only did they develop the flu vaccine, they developed polio, which is, I believe, a 2-shot vaccine these days, and then you need a booster. So I had a booster as an adult before I left for the Peace Corps. So it's still around. They are obviously still vaccinating against it because it's still deadly, and it's not completely gone. It's not smallpox. So smallpox, as far as we know, is completely gone, except for, hiding in some military labs, which is slightly frightening. And so the author obviously was, I don't think it says when he dies. I'm assuming he's passed since now, but still. So fantastic book. This is the back of it. So I'm assuming he's somewhere in San Francisco, because that's what it sounds like where he's at. So fantastic book. Particularly if you're looking at vaccines. I mean, this is being shot in September of 2021. COVID is still raging because people don't want to get vaccinated. And so the hospitals are filling up again with ICU patients, which sucks because they don't want to get vaccinated. And this isn't even a vaccine that involves the COVID vaccine does not involve a dead COVID vaccine at all. This is a brand new set of viruses. Well, it's also a brand new way to create vaccines, which I'm sure this guy would be really, really happy about because you don't have to kill something. Obviously, I'm very, very pro-vaccine. My daughter is completely caught up, and polio is really one of those shots that you don't want to not give your children because it's a highly contagious disease, and it's not dead. It's still here. It can still get into the United States because airplanes are a thing, and it can still be spread. I'm going to do a quick double check here. I'm going to bring up, because Wikipedia, I believe it still exists in a couple other countries. If I can actually spell polio here. There we go. Polio. So let's see. Where is it still? Let's see. So it is still in endemic stage in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. So again, it's not dead. Those are the two countries where it is still very much an endemic. So, and it's still showing up in various African countries. So, yeah, it was still naturally spreading in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So, and then it's somehow still showing up periodically in places like Angola and Ethiopia and a variety of places within the Africa, the Middle East, and it looks like it's still running around in both Malaysia and China. So Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia is where it's still running around. So it's, let's see. Yeah, so far, yeah, it's not completely gone. It's like it's the only disease that's completely eradicated from humankind is smallpox, and has been since 1980. But that is mostly it. Yeah, it's 2005 cases decreased by 98% in 2016. So there were 37 wild cases and 5 circulating vaccine-derived cases. So, and no, that's Middle East. The U.S. vaccine is fine. So, Let's see, there's a little bit of information. The Americas were declared free of polio in 1994, so that's my lifetime. And the last known case was, and this is the entire both continents here. The last known case was by a boy in Peru in 1991. Let's see, it's still running, like I said, it's still running loose in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and parts of South Asia. So that's where it's running wild still. Let's see, is there any other information on here? Because yes, polio is something people are still anti-vax about. Your kids can still get polio. Let's see. Yeah, Europe was declared polio-free in 2002. And then actually the WHO confirmed 2 cases circulating of vaccine-derived polio cases in the Ukraine. So there's this is not to say the polio vaccine is not safe. Again, this is the Ukraine. Not exactly a completely modernized country. This is the United States. So, but again, it's basically they kind of screw up killing the virus, I would assume. So let's see. The last case of polio in the region of India was in 2011. Again, this was not. So there has been no repeated cases since then. So in 2012, it was taken off the endemic list in 2012. That wasn't that long ago. So let's see. So it was eradicated in 2014 in Southeast Asia. So, and which includes Bangladesh, Bhutan, North Korea, India, Indonesia, Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and I can't pronounce this country, Timor-Leste, which sounds French. So, and then it's, that's because of the vaccine, by the way. It's because of the vaccine. So because they're vaccinating against it, it's going away. Looks like there was a polio outbreak in the Philippines in 2019, though. So there was a 3-year-old infant who had it. And let's see. Moving on, the Middle East. Syria has difficulties doing lots of things, including, staying a country in stabilization. So let's see. They've had issues due to civil war. So it led to a return of polio in Syria in 2012. So let's see. There are about 15 cases confirmed in children in Syria. That's the thing. Polio kills kids. That's its big thing. It kills a lot of people, but it primarily strikes children. So let's do a little bit. Yeah. And Africa. Let's see. Northern Nigeria in 2003 was considered, that had been previously polio-free, started having issues, and then in 2013, the Center for Disease Control received 183 cases of polio in Somalia and 14 in Kenya. So it's still running rampant a little bit. It was only in August of 2020 that Africa Regional Certification Commission, I'm guessing a World Health Organization, declared Africa free of wild polio. So let's see. So that just goes into the history. But again, polio is still a thing. Please get vaccinated. This book tells about a guy. It's a really good book. It explains how this guy not only created the flu vaccine, a highly important thing. We need the flu vaccine. We need better flu vaccines. We're working on that. We're hoping the RNA, being able to do this RNA vaccines will help create a permanent flu vaccine, because nobody likes getting shots every year, and little kids have to get 2. So, but polio is really, really important. So fantastic book if you're studying STEM. It's also a good minority book. This guy was Jewish. He was probably discriminated against within the United States because he was a Jewish immigrant from Russia and Lithuania. That's where his parents came from. So he looked different. So he had to fight that as well, which is probably the reason I'm covering it this month. Well, the month this is coming out, which no, I don't know off the top of my head. I have a list. I just happened to get this book from the library right now as I work through my list. So fantastic book. I love the illustrations. Obviously, the author has a big passion for it because she grew up in the 1950s where people were still dying of polio. And no, that was not a long time ago. Polio has only recently, as in my lifetime, 1994, being declared completely out of this country. So it was barely a generation ago. So baby boomers, my parents' generation, lived in a world with polio. And it was slowly eradicated to an extent. But again, big thing, it's not gone. It's still running wild in Africa and Pakistan. People still travel to Pakistan. They still can come back if they're not vaccinated. They can put it on a plane and it can become, if you are not vaccinated, you can catch this deadly disease. You don't want to. So get vaccinated. But great book, both flu vaccine and polio vaccine. So that is it for this review. I do love doing these STEM books. A lot of times I focus on women, not always men. But this I found was an important book to do. And I believe this is coming out in May. So it's focusing on Jewish Heritage Month. So I wanted to bring in a Jewish pioneer. This one happens to be really important right now because he worked on viruses, and it's important that you get your vaccines. Again, really, really pro-vaccine in this household, particularly since we plan to travel around the world when my children gets older. Children, I have one right now. We're planning on a second. So get vaccinated. Fantastic book, particularly if you're studying the STEM field. Jewish heritage. This is one of the heroes of Jewish immigrants, because again, polio and flu, two major diseases that kill people and are still running around. Flu particularly. So again, that's the end of this video. If you like what you see, please check out the rest of my channel. My main thing is children's books. I do a lot of children's books reviews. I do family films, occasionally some a little bit older films. The only time I do R stuff is if it's educational. So that's the only time I will do an R-rated film. I never do that kind of fun R-rated film just because it's not part of this. This is a very educational channel. We are homeschoolers. My daughter has to be 2 at this point. So we're not doing, I tend to do more educational homeschooling stuff later. I have an entire set of legal videos on homeschool law if you want to check those out, along with a bunch of other stuff, including some travel videos. So again, this is being filmed in September of 2021. Our travel stuff is on hold as of when this is being shot. Hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll have a few more travel videos. So thank you.